What's up everyone, Nader here. In this video, we're going to go over a bunch of exercises together to get more practice with DOM navigation in JavaScript together. In the previous video, we looked at the DOM navigation methods, things like children and firstChild and lastElementChild and previousSibling and all that kind of fun stuff. In this video, what we're going to do is get more practice with that, going through a bunch of exercises. These are really important methods to actually get used to navigating through the DOM, both up, down, and across it. In conjunction with methods like query selector, we can really pretty much do anything and access almost any node inside the DOM in pretty much any capacity that we need. So let's just get right to the exercises together and see how far we can get. All right, so to start, I have a warm-up exercise for us. As with all the previous videos, I have these posted on GitHub, so you can go over there and either copy and paste them or clone them down for yourself. Although most of these instructions should be pretty easy to kind of just pause the video for now, at least in these videos, and kind of do the thing that you need to do, and then come and check the solution together as we code it out. So I'll go through a preamble for each of these, and then we'll actually go through a solution together. So for this one, to warm up, what I want you to do is create an HTML document that has at least one of each of these nodes or elements that I have listed right here. So let's go through these. We want to have a head with a title in it that has some text. All right, pretty self-explanatory there. We want a body, of course, and then inside the body, we want some h1 with some text inside of it. We also want a div with a p tag that has some text inside of it. We want a comment that has some text inside of it, as well as a p tag with a span inside the p tag, which has some text inside of the span element. Okay, so how you kind of order these, and if you want to add more things, definitely up to you. But I would encourage you to at least have this in there so you can get some practice grabbing different parts of the DOM. Then what you want to do is open up this file in your browser and open up the developer tools and try to select all of these options or all these elements and nodes without using query selector. Okay, so you should use things like children or firstElementChild, lastElementChild, previousSibling, nextSibling, all that kind of stuff to actually grab these different nodes. And the thing you want to keep in mind as well as you're doing this is the difference between HTML nodes as well as regular nodes, I guess, non-HTML nodes. All right, so you want to be able to grab a title tag, the comment tag, text node, the HTML element tag, and the span HTML element tag. Wow, that was quite the mouthful. So go ahead and give that a shot, and then we'll go through a potential solution together. All right, so to start, I'm just going to create this file here. I'll call this warmup.html. Let me just zoom in a little bit just so it's a bit clearer. At the very top, I'm going to add a doc type. I'm going to put some HTML. If you forgot to add the doc type, that's okay. It's just going to change some small subtle things, which I'll point out as we go. In here, we want a head, and inside the head, we want a title. And inside the title, I'm just going to put warmup. Then we want a body. And let me just switch back here. So inside the body, we want a h1 with some text. So let's do that. I'm going to say an h1. I'm going to say warm-up exercise. And then we want to do a div with a p tag inside with some text. Okay, so we're going to do a div with a p tag. Oops, that's not what I wanted. A p tag. And in here I said this is the first warm-up. There we go. And what we want to do then is a comment with some text inside. All right, so this one's a bit different. So I'll just end that right after here. So comment, angle bracket, bang, dash dash, and then should auto-complete with a dash dash angle bracket at the end there. And I'll just say warm-up exercise comment. And then finally here at the very end, and again, you can kind of put this in different orders, but I'll just change the way that you actually traverse through the DOM here. A p tag with a span tag inside of it with some text in each of them. So a p tag, then a span tag. So the p tag is going to have some text, and I'm going to say welcome to the, and I'll just say warm up exercise inside the span tag. Okay. Perfect. So that's pretty good. I'm pretty sure I grabbed everything in there. So now we want to open this in our browser. So I'm going to right click on this, reveal in Finder, and I'm just going to zoom in there, double click this to open it in Chrome. And I'm going to super zoom in just so that we can take a look at that. Open up my DevTools, and I'm going to zoom in a whole bunch here as well. And you should be able to see that pretty clearly. And if I open up my head, keep clicking on the wrong thing there. div, and then my p tag as well. All right, so now we want to start selecting things from this DOM. So let's see what we want to select. I want to not switch to there. I want to switch to VS Code, and I want to go back to my warm-up exercise. So first we want to select the title tag, right? So let's see how we can do that. So I'll go back to Chrome. We want to be able to select this one right here, right? The title, which has warm-up in this, which is what's showing up here in the actual title. So without using query selector, okay, so let's think about this. So the title is inside the head, okay? And the head is inside the HTML. So there's actually many solutions to this. In fact, you could probably argue there's almost like an infinite amount of solutions to this. So one solution is we can actually grab the head using document.head, right? So if I do document let me zoom in a tiny bit more here, head, right? You'll see that I have access to the head tag, right? By doing that. And in there's a title. So I can do document.head. Technically I can do .title. But in this case, this actually means something else. So we're not going to go with that. We want document.head. We can, I think, do text content is one of them that we can actually grab, which we'll look at in the next video. That's actually the subject of the next video. I actually just wanted to grab the title itself, the node itself. So this is not really what we want. This is the content inside the node. To want to grab the actual title tag itself. So I'm going to say document.head.first. If I do firstChild, notice that I grab a text node, right? Which is actually a new line here. So it's a bit hard to see because my head is always in the way here. We have a new line, okay? And that's because if I go back to my HTML here, technically there's like a text node here that Prettier is putting in for me. That's actually a new line, which is a text node in the DOM, because it actually gets recognized in the DOM as some spacing. So I don't want to grab the first child. I want to grab the firstElementChild because I want to ignore text and comments in this case. So if I say firstElementChild, notice I actually grab the title. Okay, so that's pretty awesome. That pretty much solves this. Technically, if you want to think about it, I'm going to just clear this console here. I can do document.head.children. And that will give me a collection with the title in it. And I can actually just grab the first element in there, and that'll also give me the title. Okay, there's also other ways we can grab this, like we can go through the body and kind of work through the siblings. We can go from the HTML and work our way down. There's a whole bunch of things that we can do, but these are some examples of probably the most common ones that we can do. Okay, so that's the title. Comment tag. So how do we grab the comment tag itself? So the comment tag is right here in my case, right? I have it in between the div and the p tag. Okay, so let's kind of think about this. Let's go back to our console here, and I'm going to do document.body.childNodes. And I'm going to compare this to document.body.children. Okay. Now notice, if we're looking for a text element or a comment element, I should say node, sorry, we are not going to get that with children because children is only for HTML elements. Okay, so the H1 div and P in this case. But notice here, and then this node list, when we're doing child nodes, we have access to other things in there, specifically all that spacing that I mentioned Prettier installs, but also the comment right here. Okay, so I can technically go through the child nodes to grab this, but I want to show you something interesting as well. And notice that technically the lastElementChild is the P tag, right? So if I see document.lastElementChild, so document.body, I was like, this, so what is this one? Document.body.lastElementChild, we grab the p tag. Okay, now technically we know if we look at this list, right before the p tag, there's like a text node and a comment node, right? So if I do .lastElementChild.previousSibling, I get the text node. And if I do .previousSibling again, not previousElementSibling, this is tricky, previousSibling, I get the comment node. Okay, so you can see that I'm basically moving up. If you look at this list, I'm moving up the list to the left, right? I could have also gone to the div and moved down to the right. So I could do nextSibling. Now, there's a difference between nextSibling, previousSibling, and nextElementSibling and previousElementSibling, right? So we know that comments and texts are not elements, right? They're a special type of node that we can only access through either childNodes or the non-element versions of these methods. Okay, so this is just one example of how we can grab this. You can probably imagine we can go through childNodes, we can go through the div, we can go through many other ways to actually get to this comment. But that's pretty awesome. Okay, so let's keep going with this. Let's see, here's just a lot of stuff in here. Any text node. So technically a comment is a kind of text node, but you can imagine how we can kind of do this with any of our other text nodes. So if I kind of do this again, I do document.body firstChild in this case is a text node, which is that spacing that was installed. I keep saying installed, added by Prettier in this case. But what's a more interesting text node in this case is actually, I would probably say the one here in the p tag is technically a text node. Also this span tag right here. So let's take a look at how we can grab that. So if I do document.last or document.body.lastElementChild firstChild, we grab welcome to the, right? Which is right here. So this is an actual text node, which is not an element node, okay? And it's followed by this span element node, which has text inside of it. Okay, so this is quite tricky because these things change subtly as we add nested elements inside things like a p tag or a div tag or even a span tag, right? So you get more and more used to this the more that you actually use it, but this is actually a text node that's part of the DOM nested inside a p tag alongside the span, which is its sibling. Okay, so the p tag, we saw how we can kind of do this. We actually went through that. So I can do document.body.lastElementChild is the p tag, right? And this is different from lastChild, which is actually a text node. Document.body.lastChild is a text node, right? Which is the new lines before the end of the body there. So be careful with that one. The span tag, we know that we can grab from inside the paragraph, right? So we saw how we can grab the paragraph, document.body.lastElementChild. So I'll just kind of bring that up after clearing the console. Document.body.lastElementChild, we want to grab the span. So I'm going to do dot. If I do firstChild, I grab the text node, which we saw before. If I do firstElementChild, because span is an element, we grab the span tag. Isn't that cool, right? So you're probably thinking like, oh my goodness, Nader, like, please stop, right? Like, why does it matter if it's a node or if it's a text or if it's a comment or if it's a span? Like, why does any of this matter? Well, how is this relevant, right? It turns out that nodes and comments and elements all have different properties. And if we're going to be creating our own DOMs or looking at existing DOMs and trying to traverse through them or modify them in any way, we actually need to know what kind of node or element we're actually dealing with. So if we are interested in hunting through the document for things like comments, we definitely need to use something like childNodes or the non-element version of these methods, right? But if we want to totally ignore methods or ignore nodes like text nodes or element nodes, comment nodes, if we want to ignore those, right, we can just stick with the element methods like children and lastElementChild. And in fact, that is usually what we want to do, right? Usually we don't want things like the comment or the text nodes in there. So we're going to go for children and firstElementChild, lastElementChild, right? But it turns out if we do want access to those, at least we have a way to actually grab it, and especially if we want to modify it, which is going to become very useful once we start working with things like web components in the future. Okay, so that was a long warm-up, but hopefully you found it interesting. Definitely a lot going on there, so it's really, really great practice. Let's take a look at exercise 1. All right, so here is where things are going to get fun. We're going to be working on some third-party websites to really get more practice traversing through their DOM structure with something a bit more real-world and lifelike. So you might know the site depending on, I guess, how old you are, but I've used the site quite a lot. Craigslist, this is kind of before things like Facebook Marketplace and all that kind of stuff. I guess people still use it, but
really popular site. It's got a really nice DOM structure in there, very clean and very kind of performant website because it doesn't add any extra fluff on it, right? So I'd like you to open up Craigslist.org and /about to go to the about page for Craigslist. Okay, so open up in your browser and open up the DevTools. And I'm going to do this right now, but I'm going to kind of show you what I want you to select. We're going to be selecting elements from this page, again, just like we did with our HTML file that we wrote, right? So you want to grab the element, and if you're curious, you can also look through the properties like I showed you with the text content and other things in there if you're curious, but we're going to get into that in future videos. So let me just pull that up really quick. I'm just going to pull up Google just to show you you can do this a different way. I'm going to go to Craigslist, and over here, I'm going to go to Craigslist. I guess I'll go to about, and I'm going to go to Craigslist about page right here, right? So I'm going to super zoom in on this one. And you can see that this is pretty much the about page that we're interested in, right? I'm going to open the inspector. And before I kind of go along at this thing, I want to show you a couple things that you want to be grabbing. So the help element in the footer, which is actually an anchor tag, right? That is this one right here, right? Where my mouse is in the very, very bottom of the screen. This help element right here. I want you to be able to select that and actually display it in the actual console. Then I want you to select the About Craigslist bolded text in the second main column, which is in the upper right. So right here, this one right here that I have highlighted with my mouse, this About Craigslist text, I want you to actually select that, which is in a strong tag, and actually display it in the console as well. Finally, what I want you to do is select the anchor tag that links to Jim, who is the CEO, right? And that's this link right here, which you see me kind of trying to highlight but failing, right beside Craig, which is the founder of Craigslist, of course. So I want you to select this anchor tag, which is Jim, which is the highlighted blue link tag right there. Okay, so you can use a mix here of query selector and actually navigating through the DOM. In fact, I would encourage you to use a mix instead of just trying to do it without query selector for these following exercises, just so that you can get practice combining these tools, because that's exactly how we're going to be using them in practice, and they're very, very powerful together. So go ahead, give these 3 a shot, and then we'll go through it together. All right, so let's start with the help element in the footer. So I'm going to grab my little element selector right here. I'm going to go down here to help, and I'm going to click on it. Okay, so that's going to pop it up for me in my elements tab here. So it looks like I have an A tag. It's got an href on it, and it has the help text inside. So that's great. So there's nothing really identifying here about this tag, right? Like there's no ID or class or anything kind of very specific about this. It's just an A tag. So it might be a bit tricky to select. So if we kind of go up this DOM structure, let's see how we can try to select this. So there's an LI tag. Again, nothing too fancy here. We don't have an an ID or a class or anything like that to identify and pick this out specifically. So we're probably gonna have to hunt up a bit further and then work our way down. So these LI tags, it looks like, are inside of a UL, an unordered list, which is itself inside the footer. Okay, so I'm gonna guess. So this UL, right, has a class of CL footer. I'm assuming Craigslist footer, right? I'm gonna just make an educated guess that that is probably the only thing that has that class. Okay, so let's verify that really quick. CL footer. Okay, so I'm gonna say document.querySelector, and I'm going to search for .cl footer. So I'm going to search for the class name of footer, and indeed, look at that, I get my UL with all the elements in there, and the one I'm interested in is actually the second one right here in this case, right? So that's kind of important, right? So we actually grab the UL. The first LI is kind of all this stuff here, which you can see being highlighted on the bottom of the screen as I hover through these. We're not interested in that one. We want the help one, which is the second one. Okay, so if we grab this one, now we can actually ask for its children. So let's try that. So I'm going to say .clfooter.children. And then we get back an HTML collection, right? So I'm going to get this LI. Notice as I hover through these, right, it's highlighting the respective element in the DOM, which is super awesome. We want this one, number 1, which is element number 2. So I'm going to say please grab number 1 out of this. And if I do that, look at that, I grab the help element, but now I need to grab the A tag inside because this is an li. So one last step in here, I'm going to say dot firstChild. Or technically better solution, just in case there's some text in there, firstElementChild, but in this case, we actually get both. So I'm just going to do that one more time so it's more clear for you up here. So we're asking for the thing that has a class of Craigslist footer, which is going to give us the entire footer. Then we're asking for all the children nodes, direct children nodes of, or in this case, HTML elements of that footer, which are all those li tags. And we're asking for the second one, which is the help. Then we grab that li tag, and then we're asking for the firstElementChild in there, which is the a tag. Okay, so a lot going on, but really cool once we actually narrow and drill down to the actual a tag. Once we have that, we can do a lot of cool stuff, right? I could say dot inner HTML, right? Or dot text content, or dot text, I guess, right? Either way, text content, right? Or I can say dot href. We'll look at these attributes later on as we kind of go through kind of getting attributes and setting attributes and custom attributes and all that kind of stuff in a future video. But really, really awesome. Totally like so much power at our fingertips once we start choosing these different elements from the DOM. Okay, now let's move to the second one here. So how do we grab the About Craigslist bolded text in the second menu column? So that's this one right here, About Craigslist. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab my little selector and I'm going to hover over this and click on it. And it's going to pop it open for me in the Elements tab. Okay, so this is pretty cool. So I have a strong tag in this case, which is kind of the bolded text by default. And it looks like this is inside a table. So table data right here. And then, so this is a strong tag inside this table data column, or cell, I should say, which is inside a table row. So it looks like there's 2 of these, I guess. And then there's a table body, and then there's a table itself. Okay, so a lot of stuff going on in here. None of these really look like they have any like specific identifier, right? Like background color looks like it's shared across some of these. The width and stuff like that might change. I'm not really confident about going for those. If we look at this table out here, same thing. I'm not really too confident about selecting these because I feel like these could change maybe. There's a section in here. You know what? Let's just look for a table. Is this the only table on the page in this case, right? So if I go to my console, I'm going to say document.query selector, and I'm going to ask for the first table on the page. And look at that, like that actually is the only table, well, the first table at least on the page, right? So I'm curious, right? If I switch this to all, is there more tables on the page? No, there's only one table on the page, right? It looks like that's the only table on there. So that's great. So I'm just going to use query selector for that. And we grab the table. Now inside this table, we want to grab the table body. And then inside the table body, we want to grab it looks like, well, actually many rows. I think I mistakenly said there's only 2 rows, but there's many rows. So we have this row, this row, this row, this row, this row, all the way to the bottom, right? And each row has cells, probably 2 sets of cells at least. Some of these look like they probably have a little bit more, depending on if there's kind of 2 elements in that cell or not. So what we're asking is we want to grab this table and then grab the table body. So I'm going to say dot firstElementChild. Okay, so now we have the table body. Great. So now inside here, I want the first table row, right? So there's a few ways we can do that. I can do query selector again for a table row, or I can just do dot firstElementChild because I saw that this is the actual table, the first table row that we're interested in. Notice if I do firstChild, I grab a text node here. Okay, and it looks like they're kind of doing the same thing where they have a whole bunch of new lines all over the place. Okay, so we have to be really careful to do, instead of firstChild, we want to do firstElementChild, so we grab the table row. Okay, now this is getting kind of gnarly, right? We have table, firstElementChild, right? But if you think about how the DOM works, this kind of makes sense, right? We're walking through this tree, downwards through the tree to get to the actual node or element that we're interested in. So we're getting pretty close now. There's 2 table datas in this row. Which one are we interested in? Well, we're interested in the second one, right? So I'm going to say the second table data. So how can we do that? Well, I can do dot children here because I want the actual elements in here, and I want to grab the second child, just like that, right? So if I do that, I'm going to grab this table data right here. If I open that up, I have a strong tag, and that's going to be the first element child, I'm guessing, right? So I'm going to say dot first element child, and there we go. We grab the strong tag. Okay, now that is pretty cool. And admittedly, again, you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, Nader, why are you doing this to us, right? Like, this is totally bananas. And I appreciate that, I really do. But if you can read this and kind of like think about the logic behind this and how we're literally traversing the tree downwards through these nodes and through these elements, it's so powerful. We're going to get to this as we get to web scraping, for example, but this is something that's not only useful in JavaScript, it's literally useful in any language where you're working with DOM elements. Okay, so that's how we grab the strong tag, or at least one possible way we can grab the strong tag. There are many others, but in the interest of time and your attention, I'll also go to the third one in this exercise. So I want to select the A tag that links to Jim, the CEO. So how do we do that one? So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to grab my pointer here. I'm going to go to Jim. So that's right here. There's the A tag, Jim Buckmaster, right? A whole bunch of spaces in here, looks like, for styling. Look at that styling. It's some professional styling right there. I like it. It's old school. It's awesome. So in this case, we're also dealing with a table row, right? In this case, the table row is slightly different. Let's see if there's anything in here that we might be able to grab that might make this a little bit easier. So looks like we have href. This goes to Jim _ Buckmaster. Okay. And then we have all these spaces, href Craig Newmark. Okay. So what's kind of interesting is, like, could we actually grab an A tag that has an href, because this looks pretty specific, Jim _ Buckmaster, right? I want to test that out. So I'm going to ask in here, I'm going to say document.querySelector, and I'm gonna search by attribute. Okay, so to search by attribute, we can use the square brackets, and in this case, we can do href equals, and I'm gonna be searching for, what was it again? It was Jim _ Buckmaster. Wonder if I can just right click, edit attribute, and I can copy this and go back to my console and paste that in there, and I get Jim _ Buckmaster. Right? Now, be careful with the quotes in this case, right? So notice I'm using single quotes out here, so I can use the double quotes in here. So this is very the exact same actually as a CSS selector that would choose something in the DOM that has this attribute, right? So we looked at this in a previous video as well with query selector. And if I run this, you'll see that I actually do get this directly. Right? So this was kind of a trick one. You can definitely use this to cheat a little bit and actually jump directly to this node. If you wanted to, as you can imagine, you can also traverse through the actual DOM itself and grab the table row or table body, or table body, table rows, and then grab this row, and then grab this actual table data, and the actual A tag in here as well. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that there's many ways we can do this. This is definitely slightly fancier if you want to go with the actual attribute selection method. Okay, perfect. Nice. So let's take a look at exercise number 2. So for this one, what I'd like you to do is a very similar thing, right? We're going to go to a website, and I want you to search for DOM elements in that crazy looking DOM tree to see how you can actually grab that and practice a few different methods. So I want you to go to wikipedia.org for this one. And open up your DevTools as usual. And I'm going to demo this in a second, but there's a Wikiversity element in the footer section, which is not really a footer. It's quite large, I guess, in the bottom half of the page. And I want you to think as you're doing this, just like we've been kind of going through this so far, what are a few different ways that we can get to this element? And are some of these ways maybe better than other ways, and why? right? So start thinking about questions like this, right? Like as you saw me going through a DOM, I was like, oh, this might change. This might change. This looks like it's probably structure-wise going to stay the same. This is an ID, which is probably unlikely to change. This is a class that might change, right? Like all these different kind of questions are really, really valid to ask. So go through this process and actually try to imagine what type of selectors you can come up with. So before I kind of set you to it, let me just pull this up myself so I can actually show you what I mean. So if I go to Wikipedia, .org, right here, Wikipedia. I guess I could just type it in as well. I'm gonna zoom in a bunch. There we go. And you'll notice here that if you kind of scroll down a bit on the page, that there's all these different sections, right? And this is technically their footer, right? It's quite a large footer. So if I open up this in my DevTools right here, what you're interested in is, where is it? Wikiversity, this one right here. Okay, so I want you to be able to select from the Wikiversity the span element, which is actually having that text inside of it. Okay, so give that a shot and then we'll go through it together. All right, so let's actually grab our element selector here. I'm gonna kind of select this Wikiversity, and there it is. It is a span, and it has two things inside of it. So it's inside a div. Okay, so let's kind of go through this as slowly as we can, because I think there's some really interesting stuff in here that we can talk about. So to start, this span. Is there something in here that looks like it's identifying information that is unlikely to change in the future? All right, so there's a class. The class is other project title JSL10N. Okay, I'm not really sure what that means, but that seems promising, right? Maybe this will appear in other places. We'll need to actually take a look. Then there's data-JSL10N equals wikiversity.name. Okay, that actually looks kind of custom as well and quite promising. Maybe we can actually use that. I'm a bit skeptical about this JSL10N. Like I do wonder, were those generated? Are those going to change the next time they change this web page? So those are all kind of interesting questions that we might want to ask. So when it comes to the class, other project title, let's open up another one, right? So I'm going to open up, for example, this one, Wikidata, for example, right? I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to look at not the icon, the text in here, and it looks like this one has a similar class name, right? Other project title JSL10N. So we couldn't really use this. I mean, we technically could, and we can grab like the 6th one or 7th one or whatever it is, and that might work. But maybe there's a better way, right? It looks like this also has this custom property, which we're going to get at later. We're going to look at custom data attributes in the DOM, but this one has a wikidata.name. So that looks like it's custom enough to be different. So we could probably grab it by this data attribute, again, assuming that doesn't change. But what else can we do? Well, there are all these other -project divs. That looks kind of promising. Like I feel like you could probably grab all these divs, because I doubt that they would change this. It looks like a human actually wrote this. And then there's also these other project links. And then inside of there's our actual divs that have stuff inside of them. There's other project text, right? Maybe we could grab all of these ones, because we're not actually interested in the icon in this case. So that might actually be kind of cool. Let's try that to start. Let's try to grab other project-text from the divs. So let's go back to our console. Say document.querySelector all in this case, because I know that there's going to be multiple of these, and I want to grab dot. I always forget the name. I have a short-term memory. Other-project-text. 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 Okay, so if I run that, it looks like it's again a bit cut off, right? But it looks like if I scroll through these, it looks like we're grabbing the right thing. Right? So in this case, this looks like it's kind of on the right path. So we want the number index number 6, which is the 7th one, right? So if I run this again, and I grab the 7th one, which is index 6, I grab that div, which is pretty great. Then I want the span inside of here, right? So how can we grab that? Well, in this case, I'm interested in the Wikiversity span. So I can grab the firstElementChild, right? firstElementChild. Notice that the firstChild was actually a text node, which is not what we wanted. We wanted the actual element, which is the span node, which is the first one. So in this case, we actually are getting it correctly. Okay. Now, just to show you that we could have done this differently. In fact, there's an infinite number of ways we could have grabbed this. We could have gone from the document and grabbed the children and kind of narrowed it down from there. But generally, when you're selecting things, you want to grab as close to the element as possible, because if other stuff on the page changes, you're more robust to that code not actually shifting around as much. So if I do document.querySelector and I try to grab something that has an attribute of, where is it? Data-JSL10N, and then this is equal to Wikiversity.name. Notice that we actually grab the span directly, right? Which is also pretty cool. Now, which is better, right? This one looks like it's a bit more brittle because maybe they change the order of these. Maybe it's, they add something else in here that might mess up the query selector all. Maybe it becomes a second child or something, right? There's a whole bunch of things that can shift around. So maybe this is actually a little bit better where we're actually using the attribute. But then again, I don't actually know where this is coming from, right? I would need to look at that and see, how often does this change? Why is that there? What does it mean? Is it an acronym? Was it something that someone wrote, right? And then once we figure all that out, then we can probably make a better guess as to which of these two to actually use. But those are at least two methods to select that element. Okay, cool. So we went through a couple of these as we went through this as well. So hopefully you got those explanations. Let's go to the last exercise for this set of exercises. I would like you in this one to go to ebay.com. All right. It's a website that people use to auction off stuff they want to sell. A lot of interesting things on there for sure. And on that website, there's a Nav Bar. Okay. And this is quite a large Nav Bar. There's definitely a lot of stuff on there. In fact, most kind of selling websites like Amazon and like clothing websites and things like that will have these styles of nav bars that are kind of drop downs within drop downs kind of thing, right? So learning to navigate that is extremely useful. And in this case, there is a fashion menu. All right. And under that fashion menu, there's a sub menu. And I'll show you this visually in a second. But on there's a link that goes to fashion deals. Okay, I want you to select that link element, the fashion deals element, which is an A tag in that submenu. Okay, and there's a few ways to get to this. I want you to, again, think about what are some better ways. What happens if they change your website? What might be more robust than not? And as a bonus, this is something that I hope will totally blow your mind. Okay, it really did blow my mind when I started studying the DOM more and using it more kind of for front-end development as well. So what we can actually do is simulate clicks virtually, right, through our code programmatically. So I want you to see if there's a way that you can kind of click on that A tag as if you were actually moving your mouse over it and clicking on it, but through the code, right? The hint is that there's a property on there specifically related to A tags that you can use to actually simulate this. That makes it kind of interesting. Not specifically A tags actually, but it works best with A tags in this case because they're meant to be clicked with the hrefs. So give that a shot as a bonus, and we'll actually go through this all together. But before we do that, I just want to actually pull up this website really quick. So I'm going to go to Google. I'm going to do eBay, and we'll just do eBay. In this case, CA. Let me just change this to .com here, just so I can actually make sure I have the correct website up. I'm going to zoom in a whole bunch, and I'm going to open up my DevTools, and I'm going to show you here that there is a fashion menu. And notice when I hover over these menus, there's a submenu, right? And as I open the fashion menu, there's all these different links. And right here, right, where my mouse is, and I'm going to highlight it right here, okay? There's fashion deals. I want you to select this fashion deals element, which is an A tag, using query selector and all the DOM navigation methods that we looked at together, and then see if you can actually simulate a click on it. So give that a shot, and then we'll go through it together. Okay, so I'm going to grab my, actually, I don't think I can do that in this case. I'll probably just have to actually right click on it and inspect. So where is it? Fashion, fashion deals, right click, inspect. It's going to pop it open for me in my elements toolbar over here. And there we go. We have our A tag. Let's take a look at this. So there is an href, which makes sense. There is this underscore SP. No idea what that is. Looks like a whole bunch of gibberish to me. I would be skeptical to select that because I don't know if that changes or if that's generated or what that is coming from. There's an hl-cat-nav__js-link. Okay, maybe that might be useful. We can probably take a look at that. That's something that seems kind of reasonable, maybe. But let's kind of look up this DOM and see like what we can find as we go higher. So in this case, the A tag is nested inside an li tag. Okay, the li tag, as you can imagine, is inside a ul tag. Okay, the ul tag is inside a nav. But the tricky thing is that there is actually another nav, it looks like. There's a few navs on this page. There's this top categories nav as well, right? And you can imagine that this is kind of tricky, right? Because we have, there might be more navs in this, right? Nested in all these divs. So we are interested in the one that it looks like it has an ARIA label of additional categories, right? Because that's the one that has fashion deals inside of it. Now, ARIA tags are the ones that are used for accessibility. So we can probably assume that this is not going to change and that this is actually meant to be there and it's human coded. Okay, we can probably use the class as well and try to figure out if it's the second one or the first one, all that kind of stuff. But I'm pretty confident that this is what we're interested in to start. Okay, so I want to grab this ARIA label. I'm going to copy that just so I don't forget. And I'm going to go back to my console and I'm going to start coding this out. So I'm going to say document.querySelector. And I'm going to ask for something that has that attribute. Okay, ARIA-label equals additional categories. And if I press enter, I'm going to grab that link. So if I open, in this case, it's going to be a bit tricky because if I open it, it disappears. But if I open this up, what we'll see is that this has a H4 in it, which says additional categories, which is coming from here. And then the top categories is this one right here, which is the nav that we saw before it. Since fashion deals in this case is under this submenu or this category, we're interested in this set of links, not this set of links. So we have the right one. And if we kind of open this up, it looks like, is it the last one? Yeah, it is. It's the last one, last li with an A tag in there to grab our fashion deals. So let's try to grab this and kind of narrow it down even further. So we have our nav. I want to grab the UL inside of it, which I can tell is the last element child in this case. Okay, so I'm going to say that dot last element child. That gives us the UL. Inside the UL, we want the last LI, which is the one that has the fashion deals in it. So I'm going to say dot last element child again, and I'm going to grab the LI, and inside that LI, there is an A tag. So I'm going to do this one more time. And I'm going to say that dot firstElementChild, and I'm going to grab the actual A tag. Now, if we were to read this, we're saying open up this additional categories menu. Okay. Once you have that open, grab the lastElementChild, which is actually I should probably say now I'm getting confused. So I think when we said additional categories, was that fashion? I'm getting really confused as to which one was which here. But we're opening this. We're looking at last additional categories. We're looking at lastChild here, which is fashion deals, and then we're looking at the firstChild, which is the actual A tag. Now, the interesting thing here for me when I'm looking at this is what are the area tags for the other elements, right? So if I switch back to here, like why is additional categories only showing up here, right? Like what about the other, these other ones, right? Like look at these. If I'm hovering over this, like let's look at electronics. If I open up electronics, then it looks like in there I have an expander and I have a flyout, which is the one that we're interested in. And it looks like in there they have a div, which has a bunch of stuff in there. Okay, that's kind of cool. Popular topics and top categories. They have popular topics, vehicles, popular topics, additional categories. Okay, so kind of what I'm wondering is why is fashion additional categories the one that we're looking at, whereas home and garden also has an additional categories, right? So I'm actually wondering, did I do this wrong, right? So if I kind of come back in here, we can see that if I'm looking for ARIA label additional categories, Query Selector is going to give me the first match for that, right? But if home and garden has additional categories in it, why are we not seeing that as the first result? Okay, so I'm going to kind of grab this. I'm going to look at home and garden here, and I'm going to look at the flyout menu here. And in the flyout menu, it looks like they have a couple of things in here. If I open this one up, ARIA label top categories, ARIA label additional categories. Okay, so I'm going to guess that in this case, it kind of worked because there's a space here, right? So notice how this has additional categories and a space, right? So this is really good that we actually came across this, because I want to actually test if that is true. So if I kind of come back in here and I search for, let me just get rid of all this really quick, just so that we can actually see how this works. If I do additional categories, just like that, I'm going to grab the one that has all the fashion ones in it, right? Designer handbags. That's from the fashion menu. What if I do additional categories, but I put a space in it? Okay, is that going to do anything different? Didn't really look like it. If I open this up, I get, oh, eBay refurbished. That definitely doesn't look like fashion. What if I open this last one over here? I get home and garden deals. You see that right there, right below my face, right? And if I look at home and garden, I get home and garden deals instead of fashion deals. So this is actually very kind of tricky, right? Technically speaking, we could have just assumed that that would have worked just fine. I don't know though. Is this a typo on the eBay team? Did they do this on purpose? How is this actually, like, how did this space happen, right? I would actually be skeptical enough of this that I probably would switch my selector here. I wouldn't use the ARIA label to select this anymore, because there is more than one thing in this menu that actually has this selector, right? If they noticed this and got rid of the space, then my code would break and I might accidentally be selecting the home and garden deals instead of the fashion deals. And who knows what kind of disaster that might happen. Maybe we'll get, if we're buying some stuff automatically, which sounds like a terrible idea, but if we did do that, maybe we would have a whole bunch of patio furniture show up at our door instead of like shoes, for example, right? So definitely really, really cool that we were actually able to see this on a live website, right? This is not our website. This is something that is coded by the developers on the eBay team. And this is the kind of thing that we're going to run into a lot as we go, right? I would probably say that I would move up the DOM in this case to try to actually select this entire nav bar, and then grab, the 6th or 7th or 8th child or whatever, and then narrow down from there. Now that has its own problems, because if they switch the order of these navigations, then technically we would be ordering the wrong thing or going to the wrong page. So it really is like, how confident are we that this really is just a typo, or did they mean it to be this way, or is there another way for us to reach the fashion menu, which definitely, if you explore the site, there is a few more options. Okay. So enough about that. I'm just going to go back to kind of the example I had before, which is this one. So we can grab our actual A tag element. Now, let's assume whether it's this method or another method, we eventually got to this A tag. Now, check this out. For the bonus, I asked, is there a way for us to actually click on this A tag? Okay. Now, it turns out that if I do .click, and it's a function, and I call this function,
all right, on this element, take a look at what happens, okay? So I'm gonna have like one of my hands up over here, and I'm gonna kind of just press the enter key, and we're gonna see what happens when I press enter. There we go. And look at that, right? It actually navigated us to that web page, right? So we simulated a click through the DOM API on that anchor tag to actually navigate to that href that's within that anchor tag. That is totally awesome. Okay, we can programmatically kind of jump through the DOM using these DOM APIs. Super, super awesome. So now I'm actually on that fashion deals page, and I can kind of scroll around as if I had actually come in here and clicked on it. Okay, now I hope you found that interesting and super fun as well. It's really fun kind of opening up these different web pages to actually poke through the DOM and test different things like this. I encourage you to practice this with more websites or your own website just to get a feel for all the nodes that are in there, all the properties on them, and kind of how you can move up and down the DOM. This is also why it's really useful to have a very clean DOM structure, because if you have a whole bunch of like superfluous stuff in there, like a bunch of text nodes or new lines or comments, it becomes a bit trickier to jump up and down in there. And if you have too many things like divs where you don't really need a div, you can use something a bit more semantic, and you're really just doing div, it becomes very kind of messy and complicated to jump around the DOM. So it's maybe something that you can keep in mind for future websites that you build. So if you found this video interesting, I'd love it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. What we're going to do in the next video together is go over a really common and popular topic, which is the inner text, or I should say inner HTML and the text content for DOM element nodes. Okay, as well as technically comment and text nodes as well. It is probably the first way that most people look at actually modifying the DOM is by modifying the inner HTML and supplying some custom HTML to actually replace what is in that node. And we're going to see some problems with this and how we're actually not going to go with that, but also where it is useful for kind of quick and dirty mockups, as well as things like text content that allow us to safely do things instead of having to use inner HTML. In future videos after that, we're going to actually replace inner HTML with the proper method, which is actually creating real DOM nodes and actually appending them to the DOM. Can't wait to get to that video. I'll see you there. See you later.